The knock came at sunset. It wasn't a loud knock. It was soft, almost shy, like a secret whispered against the old wood of the cabin door. But there was a desperation in it, a sound that cut through the quiet Montana evening and right into Jack Brennan's soul. He set his coffee cup down, the bitter liquid sloshing over the rim. He listened. The wind sighed through the pines, but that wasn't it. There it was again. 3 more taps, even weaker this time, like a bird trying to get in from the cold. Jack pushed himself up from his chair. His body ached, a constant reminder of 5 years of grief and hard liquor. When he pulled open the heavy door, he wasn't prepared for what he saw. A little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7. She stood on his porch with no shoes, her small feet cut and bleeding on the rough-hewn planks. Her dress was a collection of tears and dirt, hanging off a frame so thin he could count her ribs. But it was her eyes that made Jack's world stop turning. They were old eyes in a young face, filled with a terror that no child should ever know. "Mister," she whispered, her voice a dry crackle of dust and fear. "Can you help me?" He just stared, a ghost from his past rising in his throat. She took a shaky breath and spoke the words that would change everything. "They said you're the only one who ain't scared of them." Jack's blood turned to ice. In Bitter Ridge, Montana, there was only one them. One family whose name was spoken in hushed tones, whose power was absolute. The Harwicks. And if a shoeless, bleeding child was on his porch invoking their name, it meant the devil was finally coming to collect his due. This little girl was shivering, but it wasn't from the October chill. It was the deep, bone-rattling shiver of pure terror. Jack had seen it before, in the eyes of soldiers and cornered animals. He knelt down, bringing himself to her level, trying to hide the storm that was raging inside him. 5 years. For 5 long years he'd been a ghost. Ever since the fire. The fire that took his wife, Sarah, and his 8-year-old daughter, Mary. The sheriff called it an accident, a tipped-over lantern, a tragic misfortune. But Jack knew better. He knew it in the way the townsfolk avoided his gaze. He knew it in the nightmares his daughter Mary had started having weeks before she died. Nightmares of bad men in a big house. He knew it because his wife, a schoolteacher with a spine of steel, had been asking questions. Questions about the Harwick family. He'd quit the force, sold their house in town, and retreated to this remote cabin with a bottle for a friend. He was trying to die slowly. But the anger that never died, it just simmered, waiting for a spark, and now that spark was standing on his porch. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse. "Emma," she breathed. "Emma Crenshaw. My folks died a couple years back. My aunt, she rents me out to work." Jack's jaw tightened into a knot of granite. He'd heard the rumors. Children from poor families, rented out as servants to the wealthy. It was a dark secret the town kept, but he never imagined how dark. "The Harwicks," Emma whispered, her eyes darting toward the tree line. "I was working at their big house, cleaning, serving at their parties. But today I heard something." Jack stood up, his hand instinctively going to the place on his hip where his deputy's pistol used to sit. The ranch was isolated, miles from town. If they were chasing her, they could be out there right now, watching, waiting. "Come inside," he said, his voice a low command. "We'll talk where it's safe." She scurried past him into the small, Spartan cabin. He poured her a cup of water and watched as she gulped it down, her small hands shaking so hard the cup rattled against her teeth. He sat across from her at the simple wooden table, the flickering lamplight casting long shadows across her frightened face. "Tell me what you heard," Jack said. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling down her dusty cheeks. "They was in Mr. Caleb Harwick's office, him and his brother Silas. They didn't see me. They was talking about getting rid of some kids who know too much." Jack's heart hammered against his ribs. "What kind of things, Emma? What did these kids see?" Her voice dropped to a barely audible whisper. "Bad things, mister. They hurt kids. They sell 'em to rich men who visit from out of town, and they kill anyone who tries to stop them. The cabin seemed to tilt on its axis. He'd suspected the Harwicks were monsters. He suspected they were behind the fire. But this was an evil he couldn't have fathomed. He had to ask. He had to know. "Emma," he said, his voice strained, "do you know what happened to my family 5 years ago? My wife, Sarah, and my daughter, Mary." Emma's face went white as a sheet. She nodded, a single slow movement that felt like a death sentence. "Your Mary," she whispered, her voice breaking. "She tried to help us. She'd sneak us food from the parties. She told us she was going to tell her mama and daddy everything the Harwicks was doing." A sob escaped her lips. "That's why they did it. They set the fire. It wasn't no accident, mister. They murdered them." The rage Jack had been nursing for 5 years exploded in his chest, a white-hot supernova of hate. His family hadn't just died. They had been executed. Executed for being good. Executed for trying to save children like the one sitting across from him. "Where are the other children?" he growled. "Some go home at night. But some of us, we ain't got homes. We sleep in the basement of the Harwick house. There's about a dozen of us down there." Jack felt sick. A dungeon full of stolen children, right under the noses of a town too scared to speak. Emma reached into a hidden pocket in her torn dress. She pulled out something small and grimy. It was a little cloth doll, its yarn hair matted, its simple dress stained with something dark. Something that looked like old blood. "This was your Mary's," Emma said, her small hand trembling as she held it out. "She gave it to me. The day before the fire. She told me to keep it safe. She said if something happened to her, someone would come looking for the truth. She said to give this to that someone." Jack took the doll. His hands, calloused from years of ranch work, felt clumsy and huge holding the tiny toy. Sarah had made it. He remembered her sitting by the fire, humming as she stitched, Mary watching with wide, excited eyes. A memory so painful he'd buried it deep. "But mister," Emma whispered, leaning closer, "there's more. Your Mary, she was smart. Real smart. She knew they might try to hurt her. She wrote it all down. Every name, every face, everything she saw." Jack looked up from the doll, his eyes locking with hers. "Where? Where did she hide it?" "I don't know exactly," Emma said. "But she told me she hid it somewhere safe. Somewhere only her daddy would know to look." Before the weight of that statement could fully land, Emma froze. Her eyes widened in panic, staring past Jack, through the small cabin window, and into the encroaching night. "They found me!" she gasped. Outside, in the darkness, came the unmistakable sound of approaching horses. Fast. More than one. Jack lunged for the lamp, plunging the cabin into blackness. He grabbed his old rifle from its pegs above the fireplace, the cold steel a familiar and welcome weight in his hands. 5 years of grief had hollowed him out. 5 years of anger had sharpened his edges. He was about to find out if it had made him strong enough to face the devils who had destroyed his life. The little girl with no shoes had knocked on his door for help. But Jack was starting to think she was the one who had come to save him. Through the grimy windowpane, Jack could see them. 3 riders, moving with the slow, arrogant confidence of wolves who have their prey cornered. The moonlight glinted off the silver conchos on their saddles, off the rifle barrels resting in their laps. "Get down," Jack whispered to Emma. "Behind the table, stay quiet." She didn't hesitate. She scrambled across the floor and curled into a tight ball, clutching Mary's doll to her chest. The sight of her, so small and so practiced at hiding, stoked the furnace of Jack's rage. The riders stopped about 50 yards out, just beyond the effective range of a pistol. One of them, a big man with a familiar slouch, called out, "Jack Brennan, we know you got something that belongs to the Harwick family. Send the girl out, and we'll ride away peaceful like." Jack recognized the voice. Tom Bradshaw, a man who used to be a decent ranch hand before Caleb Harwick's money poisoned his soul. Now he was just a hired thug. "Don't know what you're talking about, Tom," Jack yelled back, his voice bouncing off the cabin walls. "Ain't nobody here but me." A low chuckle drifted back through the night. "Now, Jack, we both know that ain't true. Little Emma ran off. Her aunt's worried sick. We're just here to take her home." Behind the table, Emma let out a small, choked sob. She knew what kind of home they meant. A cold basement filled with pain and fear. Jack wasn't just protecting a runaway. He was guarding the gates of hell. "She stays here," Jack shouted, his voice ringing with a finality that surprised even himself. "If her aunt wants to see her, she can come here herself, in the daylight, with the sheriff." He knew mentioning the sheriff was a gamble. If Emma was right about him, it could make things worse. There was a long silence from outside. Jack could hear the men murmuring to each other, their voices low and angry. Then Bradshaw called out again, his tone stripped of any pretense of friendliness. "You got it till sunrise, Brennan. If that girl ain't outside by then, we ain't knockin'. And you know we got more men than you got bullets." The sound of hoofbeats faded into the darkness, but Jack knew they weren't gone. They were just setting up a perimeter, waiting for the sun to give them an advantage. They had given him about 6 hours. 6 hours to save a child's life. 6 hours to decide if he was ready to die for a ghost. He lit the lamp again, the small flame pushing back the shadows. Emma crawled out from her hiding spot, her face streaked with tears, but her eyes holding a flicker of defiance. "They won't give up," she said. "They can't. I know too much." "Then you're going to tell me," Jack said, sitting down heavily. "You're going to tell me everything. Every last detail." Emma took a deep, shaky breath and began to speak. She told him about the parties, about the rich, powerful men who came from as far away as Denver and San Francisco. She told him about the basement, the cold stone floor, the single barred window high on the wall. She told him about the other children, their names, their faces, the quiet ways they tried to protect each other. She spoke of things that made Jack's stomach turn, things that no child should ever witness, let alone endure. The casual cruelty of Caleb Harwick, the cold, reptilian viciousness of his brother Silas, the hollow-eyed fear of the children who had tried to run and simply disappeared. "And my Mary," Jack prompted, his voice a raw whisper. "Tell me exactly what she did." "She was different," Emma said, a faint smile touching her lips for the first time. "Most folks' kids, they pretended we didn't exist. But Mary, she saw us. At a big party, she saw one of the rich men hurt a little boy named Peter. Real bad. Mary started screaming at him, a little bitty thing screaming at this big, important man. Emma's eyes shone with the memory. Mr. Caleb grabbed her. He told her if she ever said a word, he'd hurt her and her folks. But she wasn't scared, not Mary. She told me later she was going to tell her mama everything. She said her mama was the smartest lady in town and would know what to do. And she was writing things down," Jack said, the pieces clicking into place. "Yes," Emma confirmed. "She said she was making a list of all the bad men, so her daddy the deputy could lock them all up forever." Jack's mind was a whirlwind. Where would an 8-year-old girl hide something so important? A place only he would know. The old oak by the creek, the loose stone in the fireplace of their old house? As if reading his mind, Emma reached into her pocket again. But it wasn't the doll this time. She pulled out a small, tarnished silver locket. Jack's breath hitched in his throat. It was Sarah's, his wedding gift to her. He had searched the ashes of their home for it, a desperate, half-mad hunt for one last piece of his wife. He'd thought it was melted, gone forever. "Where did you get this?" he choked out. "Mary gave it to me," Emma said softly, "the night before the fire. She said if I ever saw you again, to give you this and the doll. She said this would help you find her secret." With hands that shook like autumn leaves, Jack took the locket. The clasp was stiff, but it opened. Inside, the tiny portrait of Mary was still there, her smile beaming up at him from across the years. But there was something behind it. A minuscule piece of folded paper, tucked away with a child's careful secrecy. He gently worked it free and unfolded it. On the paper, in Mary's unmistakable looping script, were 5 words. "Daddy, where the stars dance." The world fell away. It was their secret phrase, their special place. a hill behind their old house, a spot with a clear view of the heavens. On summer nights, he'd take her there, and she would lie on the blanket and say the stars looked like they were dancing just for her. There was a large boulder there, one she always said looked like a sleeping bear. Under the bear rock, he'd whispered to her once, is where pirates bury their treasure. She'd hidden her evidence there. His smart, brave little girl had left him a map. But as a surge of hope washed through him, Emma's voice, small and urgent, pulled him back to the terrifying present. Mister, there's something else. Something bad is happening tomorrow night. Jack looked at her, saw fresh terror in her eyes. I heard them planning. They're moving all the kids from the basement, taking them somewhere else, somewhere far away. And they said they had to get rid of anyone who might cause trouble. Anyone who knows too much. The walls of the cabin felt like they were closing in. It wasn't just about past crimes anymore. It was about to happen again. Emma's voice dropped so low he had to lean in to hear it. They said your name, Mr. Brennan. They know you've been asking questions. Mr. Caleb said it was time to finish what they started 5 years ago. The threat wasn't just out there in the darkness anymore. It was here. It was personal. They were coming for him. And they were coming for the last witness. As the hours ticked toward a deadly dawn, Jack Brennan looked from the locket in his hand to the terrified child before him. His daughter had left him a map to the truth. And this little girl was his only key to saving the future. He picked up the rifle. He wasn't a deputy anymore. He wasn't a grieving husband or a drunk. Tonight, he was just a father. And he would burn the whole world down to protect this child. The men outside thought they had him trapped. They had no idea they were the ones who were about to be cornered. Jack ran his thumb over the worn fabric of the doll, the weight of it feeling wrong in his hand. It was too heavy, too dense in the middle. Sarah had always used soft cotton batting. This felt different. She kept it with her, Emma whispered, watching him. Always. His fingers found what they were looking for, a section of the side seam where the stitches were clumsier, thicker. Mary's work. He carefully picked at the threads with the tip of his knife. The seam opened. Inside, wrapped in a small piece of oilcloth to protect it from the elements, was a tightly folded packet of papers. His heart pounded a frantic rhythm against his ribs as he unfolded the first page. It was a letter, written in his daughter's careful 8-year-old hand. Daddy, if you are reading this, I am gone. Mama too. Mr. Harwick did it. Don't be sad. You have to save the other kids. They cry at night in the cellar. Mama wanted to tell Sheriff Coleman, but he is one of the bad men. He comes to the parties. I made a list for you. Find it where the stars dance. I love you. You're Mary. The air left Jack's lungs in a ragged gasp. Proof. Written proof, in his daughter's own hand, that the sheriff himself was part of it. The man he'd once called a friend. The man who had stood over the ashes of his home and patted his shoulder with false sympathy. The betrayal was a fresh, hot poker to his soul. He read the list of names Mary had compiled. Sheriff Coleman, Judge Morrison's brother, the owner of the general store. A dozen prominent citizens of Bitter Ridge, all painted as monsters by the pen of a child they had murdered. This town wasn't just scared. It was complicit. Rotten from the inside out. We have to get that list, Jack said, his voice a low growl. We have to go to the hill. Tonight. No! Emma grabbed his arm, her little fingers digging in with surprising strength. They're watching. I saw them on my way here. Men on the ridge, another one down by the creek. They're waiting for you to leave the cabin. It's a trap. He peered through a crack in the shutters. In the pale moonlight, he could just make out a silhouette on the ridge above his property. A man with a rifle. She was right. He was pinned down. Panic, cold and sharp, tried to claw its way up his throat. He was alone. Utterly alone. He couldn't go to the law. He couldn't trust anyone in town. He and this little girl were an island, surrounded by a sea of sharks. There has to be someone, he muttered, pacing the small space. Someone who isn't owned by the Harwicks. Emma's eyes lit up. Doc Morrison. He sets the bones for the kids who get hurt working. He always looks so sad when he does it. And Father Miguel at the church. He slips us bread sometimes when Mrs. Harwick isn't looking. And Miss Rose. Jack stopped. Rose Sullivan? From the saloon? Emma nodded. She's always asking questions. About kids who go missing. The Harwicks hate her. A flicker of a plan began to form in Jack's mind. Doc Morrison, Father Miguel, and Rose Sullivan. An unlikely trio. A doctor sworn to do no harm, a priest sworn to protect the innocent, and a saloon owner who saw and heard everything. They were all compromised in their own ways, all living under the Harwicks' shadow. But maybe, just maybe, they were scared enough, and angry enough, to finally fight back. The problem was getting to them. He was trapped. The sun would be up in a few hours, and when it rose, Bradshaw and his men would storm the cabin. He needed a diversion. He needed a miracle. And then he looked at Emma. She was staring at the floor, a new kind of fear on her face. "What is it?" Jack asked. "The aunt who rented me out," Emma said quietly. "She's not really my aunt. The Harwicks. They took me after my folks died. They told everyone she was my family so no one would ask questions if I was seen with her. She works for them. She's the one who watches us." Another twist of the knife. The woman who was supposed to be her guardian was actually her jailer. "She lives in town," Emma continued. "She knows things. Maybe she knows a way to get a message out without them knowing." It was a long shot, a desperate gamble. The woman was one of them. But what choice did he have? Suddenly, a floorboard creaked under the cabin. It wasn't Jack. It wasn't Emma. The sound came from below. Jack froze, his rifle coming up instantly. Emma's eyes went wide. She pointed a trembling finger at the ragged bearskin rug in the center of the room. "There's a root cellar," she whispered. "The old owner showed it to me. Someone was in his house, not outside, inside." He held a finger to his lips, silently gesturing for Emma to hide behind the stone fireplace. He crept toward the rug, his heart hammering a deafening beat in his ears. With the barrel of his rifle, he hooked the edge of the rug and flung it back. A wooden trapdoor was set flush with the floorboards, and as he stared, a splinter of light appeared in the crack. Someone down there had just lit a match. Slowly, carefully, Jack knelt down. He gripped the iron ring handle and, in one swift motion, yanked the door open and leveled his rifle into the darkness below. A man squinted up at him, a half-lit stick of dynamite in his hand, the fuse already sputtering. It wasn't one of Harwick's thugs. It was Sheriff Coleman. "Drop it, Jack," the sheriff hissed, his face pale with sweat in the flickering matchlight. "Caleb wants this loose end tied up. You and the girl. He wants it to look like another accident." The fuse burned closer to the dynamite. Jack had a split second to make a choice. Shoot the sheriff and risk the dynamite going off, blowing them all to Kingdom Come? Or let the man who betrayed him burn him alive, just like he'd done to his family? The fuse spat a bright spark. Jack didn't shoot. He slammed the heavy trapdoor shut, the force of it extinguishing the match. He heard a muffled curse from below, then a frantic scrambling. He threw his body onto the door, just as the sheriff tried to force it open from underneath. "Emma! The big trunk!" he yelled. She understood instantly. Together, they shoved his heavy wooden trunk onto the trapdoor, trapping the sheriff in the cellar. They could hear him pounding on the wood, his shouts muffled and furious. They had caught one of the wolves, but the rest of the pack was still outside. And now they knew he was on to them. The siege was no longer a waiting game. It was about to become a war. Outside, a voice cut through the pre-dawn quiet, colder and more menacing than Bradshaw's had been. "Brennan, this is Caleb Harwick. Your friend the sheriff seems to be late for his appointment. You have 10 seconds to send out the girl, or we're turning your cabin into the same kind of funeral pyre your wife and daughter had." Torches flared to life in the darkness, circling the cabin like fiery eyes of colossal beasts. There were more of them now, at least 6 riders, and the man in the lead, sitting tall on a black stallion, was the devil himself. Caleb Harwick stared at the small cabin, his mustache a silver slash in the torchlight, his eyes cold and empty. He had come to finish the job. "Emma," Jack whispered, his back pressed against the wall. "Can you load a rifle?" She gave a single, determined nod, her small face set like stone. "Mary taught me. She said a girl's got to know how to fight for what's right." Jack's throat tightened. He pushed a second rifle and a box of cartridges toward her. "Good girl. Stay low. Keep 'em loaded for me." "Brennan, your time is up!" Harwick roared. A shot rang out, splintering the window frame inches from Jack's head. He returned fire without hesitation, the recoil of the big rifle a familiar comfort against his shoulder. One of the riders screamed and tumbled from his saddle. The night exploded into a chaos of gunfire and shouting. The Harwick men fanned out, using his barn and woodpile for cover. Bullets tore through the thin cabin walls, sending splinters flying like deadly shrapnel. Jack moved from window to window, a phantom in the dark, making every shot count. He was outnumbered, outgunned, but he was fighting on his own ground, fueled by 5 years of pure, distilled rage. "Burn it!" Harwick screamed. "Burn him out!" A bottle filled with oil and a burning rag sailed through the air, crashing against the side of the cabin. Flames erupted, greedily licking their way up the dry logs. Smoke began to pour through the cracks, acrid and choking. Emma coughed but didn't falter, her small hands working with a terrifying efficiency, pushing fresh cartridges into the hot rifle. "The back window, Mr. Brennan!" she cried out. Jack spun just in time to see a man trying to climb through. He fired from the hip, the blast sending the gunman tumbling back into the dirt. But the fire was spreading, the heat becoming unbearable. They were being cooked alive. Through the smoke and the crackle of flames, another sound reached them, a new sound, more hoofbeats, coming hard and fast from the direction of town. For a heart-stopping moment, Jack thought it was more of Harwick's reinforcements. He was finished. Then a voice, strong and clear, cut through the din of the gunfight. "Jack, hold on, son! We're coming!" It was Doc Morrison. 3 riders burst into the firelight like avenging angels. Doc Morrison, his medical bag slapping against his horse's flank, held a shotgun like he was born with it. Beside him rode Father Miguel, his priest's collar stark against the night, a Winchester rifle in his hands. And riding astride like any man, her red hair a banner of defiance, was Rose Sullivan from the saloon, a pistol in each hand. The tide had just turned. "It's over, Harwick!" Rose yelled, her voice ringing with the fury of a woman who had seen too much and stayed silent for too long. "Drop your weapons!" Harwick's men hesitated, caught between Jack in the cabin and the unexpected cavalry at their backs. But Caleb Harwick was not a man who surrendered. With a demonic roar, he spurred his horse directly at the burning cabin, his own pistol blazing, determined to kill Jack himself. Jack stepped out onto the porch, raising his rifle for the final shot. "Behind you!" Emma screamed. He spun. A 6th gunman, hidden in the shadows of the barn, had a rifle trained squarely on Jack's back. Time seemed to warp and stretch. The man's finger tightened on the trigger. Jack knew he was too late. Then a small body slammed into the back of his legs. Emma had thrown herself at him, her desperate tackle sending him stumbling forward just as the rifle cracked. The bullet that should have pierced his heart hissed past his ear, close enough to feel its heat. Jack's return shot was instantaneous. The sniper in the barn crumpled without a sound. The sudden silence was deafening. When the smoke cleared, 3 of Harwick's men were dead or dying. 2 had vanished into the night, and Caleb Harwick himself sat on his horse, bleeding from a shoulder wound from Father Miguel's Winchester, his hands slowly rising in surrender. Jack rushed to Emma, his heart in his throat. She was shaking, but a quick check showed she was unharmed. "You saved my life," he whispered, his voice thick with awe. She looked up at him, her old eyes shining in the firelight. "That's what family does, ain't it?" The fight was over, or so he thought. As Doc Morrison and the priest tied up Caleb, Rose helping Jack beat out the last of the flames, the captured rancher began to laugh. It was a horrible gurgling sound, mixed with blood and malice. "You think this is the end?" He spat, a smug grin on his face. "You fool. This was just a distraction. My brother Silas left an hour ago. He's taking the children. By the time the sun is up, they'll be on a train heading south. You'll never see them again." Jack's blood ran cold. They hadn't won. They had just been delayed. The real battle, the one for the lives of a dozen innocent children, had just begun. And they were already an hour behind. Dawn was a faint gray promise on the horizon, but time was their enemy. Inside the smoke-filled cabin, Caleb Harwick was tied to a chair, sneering at them, while Sheriff Coleman pounded uselessly on the cellar door below. Emma's small finger traced a line on the map Mary had drawn on the back of her letter. "The old Silverton mine," she whispered. 20 miles north. Mary said she saw the Harwick wagons going there once. She said the entrance is hidden." Doc Morrison peered at the child's drawing. "I've treated children with injuries consistent with a mine. Deep cuts, breathing troubles. I assumed the Harwicks were just working them in unsafe conditions." "It's worse than that," Rose said, her face grim. "Some of the men who come to see Harwick, the rich ones from out of town, they're mining men. They talk about new claims and unearthing treasures. They weren't talking about silver." The meaning was horrifyingly clear. They were selling the children to the owners of remote mining camps. Father Miguel crossed himself, his face ashen. 12 souls, trapped in the dark. Silas will not leave any witnesses. Jack strapped on a fresh gun belt, his mind a razor's edge of focus. The rage was still there, but now it was cold, controlled. "Emma, you stay here with the doc." "No!" She leaped to her feet, her small body vibrating with intensity. "I know the way. Mary and we played in those tunnels before the Harwicks took it over. It's a maze. Without me, you'll be lost before you even find them." "It's too dangerous," Jack said, his voice firm. "I won't risk you." Emma's eyes blazed, and in them, Jack saw the same unbreakable spirit that had lived in his own daughter. "Those kids in there are scared. I was one of them. You can fight Silas, but I'm the only one who can lead the children out. You need me." Rose Sullivan put a hand on Jack's arm. "She's right, Jack. Sometimes the bravest soldier is the smallest one." Against every protective instinct screaming inside him, Jack nodded. They rode like the wind, 4 riders against the coming dawn, with Emma mounted in front of Jack, her small hands clutching the saddle horn. They left Doc Morrison behind to guard their prisoners, his shotgun promising a swift end to any escape attempts. The abandoned mine was nestled in a rocky canyon, its main entrance boarded up and marked with signs warning of collapse. 2 guards were posted there, clearly visible. "They want us to come through the front," Father Miguel whispered. "It's a bottleneck, a perfect ambush." "There's another way," Emma said, pointing up a steep, treacherous goat path. "A ventilation shaft. Mary called it our secret door." She led them to an opening half hidden by overgrown sagebrush, a dark hole descending into the mountain. The shaft was tight, scraping Jack's shoulders as he lowered himself down, but it opened into a labyrinth of cold, damp tunnels. Emma moved through the absolute blackness with an unnerving confidence, her hand in his, guiding them through a world she knew by heart. Then they heard it, a sound that would be seared into Jack's memory forever. The faint, muffled sound of children crying. "There," Emma breathed, pointing toward a flicker of lantern light deep in the network of tunnels. They crept forward, peering around a corner of rock. The tunnel opened into a large chamber, and what Jack saw there nearly made him cry out in rage. 12 children, their ages ranging from 5 to maybe 14, were huddled on the cold stone floor. They were filthy, dressed in rags, their faces pale and smudged with dirt. Some had fresh bruises. All of them had the same hollow, haunted look in their eyes. Silas Harwick stood over them, along with 4 of his most brutal-looking men. They were tying the children's hands. "Move it!" Silas snarled, kicking a small boy who had stumbled. "The train won't wait. Once you're in the boxcar, you'll have a nice long ride to the copper mines in Mexico. They're paying a premium for fresh workers." It was worse than they'd imagined. He was selling them into slavery. Jack looked at Rose and the priest. He held up 3 fingers. On the count of 3, they would open fire, but before he could give the signal, Emma slipped from his side. "Wait," she whispered. She stepped out into the light of the chamber, her small voice ringing out with impossible courage. "Let them go, Mr. Silas." Silas and his men spun around, stunned. The children gasped, seeing her. "Emma," Silas sneered, recovering from his shock. "I should have known your kind was too stupid to stay put. Looks like we have one more for the boxcar." "No," Emma said, her chin held high. "I brought a friend. He's here to take us all home." It was the signal. Jack, Rose, and Father Miguel stepped out from the shadows, their weapons leveled. "It's over, Silas," Jack said, his voice like gravel. For a moment, Silas looked trapped. Then a cruel, vicious smile spread across his face. He grabbed the nearest child, a little girl no older than 6, and pressed the barrel of his pistol to her head. "Drop your guns!" he hissed. "Or the girl dies first. Then the rest of them, one by one. You can't shoot me without hitting one of them." He had them. It was a stalemate from hell. Jack couldn't risk a shot. He watched in agony as Silas's men began to herd the children toward another tunnel, the one that led to the train. They were going to lose. After everything, they were going to fail. Then Emma did something no one expected. She started to sing. It was a simple lullaby, one Jack vaguely remembered Sarah singing to Mary. Her voice was small and wavering, but it cut through the tense silence. One by one, the other children stopped crying and looked at her. Then, another small voice joined in, and another. Soon, all 12 children were singing, their voices rising together, a chorus of defiance in the face of evil. The sound was haunting, beautiful, and utterly distracting. Silas's men looked confused. Even Silas himself glanced away from his hostage for a fraction of a second, his focus broken by the surreal rebellion. It was the opening Jack needed. His pistol barked once. The shot was perfect. Silas Harwick crumpled to the ground, his hand falling away from the little girl, who scrambled back toward the other children. The chamber erupted into a final, desperate gunfight. It was close, brutal, and over in seconds. When the gun smoke cleared, Silas and his men were dead. Jack rushed toward the children, but stopped dead. Clutched in Silas Harwick's lifeless hand, dangling from a broken chain, was a small silver locket. Mary's locket, engraved with tiny forget-me-nots. The one she had worn every day of her life. He fell to his knees, the weight of 5 years of unanswered questions crashing down on him. The man who murdered his daughter had kept a trophy. The final, profane insult. Father Miguel knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shaking shoulder. "She is at peace now, Jack," the priest said softly. "They both are." Outside in the bright morning sun, Rose was tending to the rescued children. Emma, their small, fierce general, was organizing them, calming them, her own trauma momentarily forgotten in her duty to the others. When Jack emerged from the mine, blinking in the light, Emma ran to him. "There's something I didn't tell you," she said, her voice heavy with a secret she had carried for too long. "About Mary, after the fire. She didn't die right away." Jack stared at her, his heart stopping. "The Harwicks thought she was gone," Emma continued, tears welling in her eyes. "But she crawled into the old root cellar behind your house. I found her there. I brought her water. I tried to help." She pulled a small, water-stained notebook from her dress pocket. She was hurt so bad, but she kept writing. She said her daddy would come for the truth one day. This was her last letter. She made me promise to only give it to you when all the bad men were gone. With trembling fingers, Jack took the notebook and opened it to the last page. The handwriting was weak, fading at the end, but it was unmistakably Mary's. "Daddy, I'm not scared. I know you'll save the other kids. Tell Emma she's the bravest girl I know. Tell Mama I kept my promise to help people. And Daddy, don't be sad forever. There are other little girls who need a papa. I love you bigger than all the stars. Your Mary." The dam inside him finally broke. Jack Brennan sat on the ground, surrounded by the children his daughter had died to save, and he wept. He wept for his wife, for his daughter, for the 5 years he had lost to rage and grief. And as he cried, Emma climbed into his lap and wrapped her small arms around his neck, holding him tightly, just as Mary used to do. 3 weeks later, Bitter Ridge was a different town. Federal marshals, armed with Mary's notebook and the testimony of the rescued children, had descended like a storm of righteousness. Caleb Harwick, broken and defeated, had confessed to everything, implicating a network of powerful men that stretched across 3 territories. The arrests were swift and public. Sheriff Coleman was dragged from his own jail in chains. The children's home established by Doc Morrison, funded by reward money and town donations, became a beacon of hope. Rose Sullivan was its matron, her sharp wit and fierce love a perfect shield for the wounded souls in her care. All 12 children from the mine found safe, loving homes. But Emma stayed with Jack. The adoption was finalized on a cold December morning. She was Emma Crenshaw Brennan now. A new name for a new life. "Are you sure about this?" Jack had asked her the night before, his own fears surfacing. "I'm a broken man, Emma. Full of ghosts." She had smiled, a real, carefree smile that lit up her whole face. "Everyone's got ghosts, Papa Jack. But Mary taught me the good ones just remind us to take care of the living." His ranch, once a monument to loneliness, was transformed. It became a sanctuary, a place where other children in need could find a safe harbor. Emma discovered she had a gift with horses, a quiet patience that could gentle the wildest Mustang. It was a gift she used on the broken children who often came to their door. 6 months after that fateful knock, Jack stood with Emma at the cemetery. He placed wildflowers on 2 graves. One was for Sarah, the other was for Mary. The new headstone told the truth. Mary Brennan, beloved daughter and hero. She saved the children. Emma, now wearing sturdy boots and a clean dress, placed her own small bouquet on the grave. "Thank you, Mary," she whispered. "I'll take good care of him. I promise." Jack put his arm around her small shoulders, a wave of profound peace washing over him. Out of the ashes of his old life, a new one had been born. A family forged not of blood, but of courage, and a love that had conquered the purest evil. As they walked home, hand in hand, the first stars began to appear in the vast Montana sky. "Papa Jack," Emma asked, "do you think Mary can see us?" Jack looked up at the heavens, at the millions of glittering lights. "I know she can, sweetheart," he said. "And I think she's finally dancing." The story of Jack and Emma became a legend in that part of the country. A reminder that even in the darkest of nights, the smallest light can lead you home. And that sometimes, the family you choose is the one that truly saves you. If you were moved by this story of courage and redemption, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more tales that prove the human spirit can never truly be broken.